you, folks. Thank you very much. In the words of Yogi Berra, thank you for making the occasion necessary.
Well, if you're here, the occasion is more than just necessary, Hector. Thank you so much. I was so excited to be able to have this conversation with you. And, before we even get into like your acting, like when I was really doing my homework about your life and your career, I saw how immersed in the arts you were and in sports before acting even really became like the thing that you were doing. So let's talk about just that part of your life when you were a musician and playing classical guitar. Like, how did you get into all that?
First, thank you very much. Thank you so much, folks. You all look terrific. So you're not an oil painting. You're actually out there. It's a wonderful thing. It happened, first of all, by I was fortunate enough to be raised at a time and a place where I was surrounded by the arts. New York City in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. How can you escape it, right? And I was born and I was raised in Harlem, both East and West Harlem. So, need I say more? I had the classical music on the west part of it, and then I had the jazz and the Afro-Cuban stuff and the rest of it. So it was very, very rich. And of course, you can't escape the richness of culture when you're raised in New York City, particularly at that time, particularly in the public schools. I became interested in music by osmosis. It was just natural. I could scat when I was 10. I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. And that's another story, how that happened. And before anything else, I saw my future, at least a glimpse of my future, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, when I was forced to volunteer for a television show called The Okie Dokie Ranch House with Wendy Barry. Now let's see I can discern by your age whether you chuckled with that.
Nobody.
That's you had to have a crystal set to listen to this thing. It's for NBC, round TV, black and white, of course, and it was a precursor to the Howdy Doody show. So I was on the precursor to the Howdy Doody show, and against my will. I won't go. I won't go into that, but that's a story that pointed the way towards my interest in the arts, my involvement in the arts, especially music. A very kind gentleman had something to do with that by the name of, let's see how much of you remember. This is a test. Are you real Americans? W.C. Handy. Hello, good on you, man. That's very good.
Nice
the
job.
Father of the blues. So he had something to do with it. I did not know the gentleman. I did not know who he was until many, many years later, perhaps decades later. When I saw a photograph, I heard someone say, wait a minute, that's the little old man. That's the little gentleman that they held gingerly by the shoulders. He was blind. He had dark glasses, who said something to my overdressed uncle after the performance, after I sang. And I was singing a song that I had no business singing, a song that he had written. Here I was, I think a 9 or 10-year-old kid singing St. Louis Woman. That was the beginning. Suddenly, after days or weeks later, I was whisked to a rehearsal room. I had never heard rehearsal. What's that? Okay, we're going to rehearsal. Went with my overdressed uncle to the West 50s, to one of the rehearsal rooms there in New York, in Manhattan. And there I was waiting with the other children. They all had portfolios. I had no portfolio. Mm-hmm. You know, they told me to bring music. So I said, all right, I brought music. I thought, okay, I'm going to bring music. I thought the music was, everybody listen, if you were interested in music at all, particularly popular music, which then more than a smattering of jazz, you remember? You bought the Hit Parader magazine every month. So I used to cut out the lyrics from the songs I liked, which I knew all the songs, it seems. I cut out the lyrics, a little snippet of thing, and I put it in my pocket. And there I was at the rehearsal with my overdressed uncle, sitting with the other kid, my legs saying, anyway, this is boring, what am I doing? And they call me Victor Alexander. Of course, they mispronounced it. I was used to that. Or Victor Alonzo. Okay, I got up and sheepishly walked into this place, and there's the upright pianos. It was a movie set now, in retrospect. And a couple of gentlemen were there with their cigars and the garters, the sleeve garters, you know. They were the whole deal, man. And I said, okay, I was just a kid. I said, no, where am I? And they said, how are you, kid? What's your name? Hector. Okay. Where's your music, kid? I said, here it is, sir. And I reached in, and I gave him the lyrics. And they were so cool. Never laughed, never made fun of me. They looked at the lyrics. I said, okay. They put it on the piano. And put his hands on the keys. And I'm sitting here. He looked at me and says, okay, you first. So I started with what I was saying. Something like that. And the guy said,
Nice.
all right, son, all right, you want to do that again? Sure. I did it again. That's it. Thank you very much. Never made fun of me. Just took the lyrics, and they were terrific. Walked out and I said, do I have to do this again to Michael? No, you don't have to. Can I go back to play? It was not a good thing to do this. I mean, that's what you do. And then, of course, I did the day's job, and it was long, boring. Now, when I got the check, not me, when my parents opened the check in our kitchen on West 107th Street in New York City, it was all very ceremonial, you know. And my mother, who never learned how to speak English very well. As a matter of fact, I don't think she ever learned how to pronounce shrimp. She called it eskrink. So, Mama, it's shrimp, Mama. No, eskrink. No, but say shrimp. Déjame ya. That was it. So there they are. She's standing there, and Dad, very serious. My dad, my sister, who very rarely smiled, was standing there. And we're all looking. He opens the check. He said, this is a different time. This isn't right. This is not right. What, ¿qué pasó, Madrid? ¿Por qué? What's going on? What's wrong? A kid shouldn't be making this much money.
Oh, whoa.
He says, this is what a grown man makes. It was $30-something.
Oh, man, wow.
Hello.
Wow.
You know, sit back, the pages of the calendar. So you see the value system I came from. And he said, no, you want to do this again? Fine, but this isn't right. In other words, you got to work to make $30, you know. So I was lucky.
Well, I over these years, your younger years, especially you were a musician, and then you were also very much into sports, with especially basketball and baseball. Yeah. But you got scouted for like the New York Giants and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Like, how did you go from being that good in sports, especially baseball, and transition to acting?
It happened without my planning or thinking. I love sports. I love baseball. Love boxing too. My dad was a terrific teacher and a student of the game. Very gentle and quiet man who had a terrific jab. He called it la culebra. Ping! So, right? It just came out from the elbow like that quick. Man. And Dad would never start a fight. Had a wonderful sense of humor. But he taught me never show off. Never celebrate your victories, no mourn your defeats. Stay cool, sereno. So I was surrounded by sports. I was a skinny, weak kid. I wanted to be a strong athlete. That was my dream. Mm-hmm. Most of the time I was going to the doctor, I had a stomach, so I was neurasthenic. I was not, as they say in Yiddish, a starker. This was not what I was. My father was, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to you? You have to take care of yourself in this neighborhood. And that's how I became involved in sports. Mm-hmm. Little by little, I became immersed in it because he taught me the beauty of sports, especially he loved baseball and boxing. Basketball, coming from Puerto Rico in that time, not too much basketball, but I couldn't escape sports where I was, and it saved my life.
How so?
I spent the whole day playing, for heaven's sake. I was too tired to be a complete idiot when I got home,
Yeah.
Just feed me and boy, what are you going to say? That's how you want to take care of make sure he stays active.
Okay, well, we get questions submitted from our members here. So, like on these cards, it says SAG-AFTRA Foundation. And I was going to ask this question anyway, but I'm going to take it from Dana Jones, who asks, at what moment did you realize you wanted to become an actor?
Good. Wowee. Alrighty. 2 moments. If I can remember his name. Someone invited me to my first play. Happened to be a Broadway play. Was it a Broadway play? No, off-Broadway.
Love about Broadway. Your first.
That'd be a Broadway. Oh, could be off-Broadway, another one. But anyway, and I said, all right. It was a play with music, not a musical. And I saw Billy D. Williams suddenly came out to do a scene. It was a Taste of Honey, and he went to high school, the same high school. I think he graduated a couple of years before I did. And I said, wait a minute, I know that dude. That's Billy D, man. That's from Commerce High School. I couldn't believe it. I said, what that jive ass is doing up there? Look at him. He's singing and dancing and going bop. I said, shit, I can do that, man. That's what I thought, you know. I said, this is terrific, and he's telling a story. That was the beginning of my interest, that everybody was mesmerized by what was going on that stage. Later on, of course, years later, I realized that that's what my part in the theater was about. I was the intermediary between author and audience. Telling the story is the most important thing. The oldest thing you can do in human history is, besides birthing, is telling the story of what it's like to be alive. And that's how that started. And I said, oh, and then, well, of course, when I saw Marlon Brando on screen, I said, I want to do that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't know what the hell he's doing, man, but I want to do that. I saw lots of movies. My father, there was, James Cagney, of course, we're going back, and of course, John Wayne. He loved the way good guys knocked the bad guy. Boom, ese da buen puño. Buen puño. I said, all right, but when I saw Brando, I saw something else. I saw an engagement that was beyond anything I'd ever seen.
Do you remember if it was like The Wild One, Streetcar Named Desire? Oh, of course. Stella.
Then, of course, after that, I did Tennessee Williams plays, and I did, Arthur Miller, too. But, yeah, Streetcar, The Wild One, of course. But Streetcar, later on, I realized what affected me, the writing. I mean, there was writing there.
Oh, yeah.
There was artistry there. So The Wild One was a Hollywood movie, but Streetcar was a story, a classic.
If it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage.
That's right.
So speaking of Stella, you took acting classes at Stella Adler Theater. What do you remember about that? And what were some of the big takeaways that you got from acting classes?
Mario Saletti was one of the teachers, and he had a lot to do, in retrospect, a lot to do with my life. I don't think he's any longer with us. He was a terrific teacher. Gently, he made me realize how little I know, how uneducated I was, culturally educated. He saw I was somewhat precocious, of course, but I didn't know anything about the world. I didn't know things in context. So he made me go to museums, made me watch, made me listen. He played music for me. You know what this is? No, really? That's not popular music. No, that's this and this. So he broadened my horizons that way. In a way that was not pedantic. He says, now I'm going to teach you a lesson. He never did that. He did that in another way that was magical. A good man, and I never really thanked him for it. I was too involved being young.
Wow. When you get to the point where you're doing theater and you're doing shows like The Great White Hope and Steam Bath, you're obviously taking it to another level now. What were some of the bigger challenges that you faced when you were starting to get like really, really meaty roles in really prestigious plays?
Wowee. Well, sometimes you... The biggest challenge is having to do a job where the notes aren't good. It's not... the writing isn't there. And it's a job. You have to pay the rent. The second biggest challenge is when you meet some people that don't make your day easier, right? And you have to know how to navigate that. So you have to have you learn social skills. I learned that by watching people who had them, as opposed to people who didn't. He's crazy, she's not, I'll watch her, So I said, very simple. So, but Steam Bath, wow, you zipped me back. Well, that's not as far back as I go, but Steam Bath was an interesting thing. That I could talk about that for a long time. Bruce J. Friedman was a terrific writer, and this was a satire. This was based loosely on No Exit, the Jean Genet, but I played God as a Puerto Rican steam bath attendant, and he had a strong working class Jibaro accent. So of course, I heard that all my life, and I always had ears for accents. I loved that because they were music to me. They were all, Scots, especially Russian, and I love the way you have to change your tongues and the placement and it's a challenge and it's musical, but steam bath was a challenge. I never speak ill of the dead.
You won an Obie Award for playing God in Steam Bath.
Yes.
So you're in your earliest years as an actor, and you won an award.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember if that made you feel like validated that you were going in the right direction? I
remember we were waiting for the papers to come out, the New York Times and the other papers and the Post, and was the Mirror around then? But we waited. We were in this restaurant and with the producers and a couple of the other actors, and it was late, and the papers come late. It was about 10 or 11 o'clock, and sure enough, it was like a movie. Talk about another time. Guy pulls up, comes out of the truck, and boom, puts the big pile of papers there tied up, and they open up, and they come into the rest, and they read from the New York Times. And I said, huh? I said, oh, this is going to sink. And suddenly I got the reviews, and I said, and I was, I don't quite remember how I left that restaurant for a minute. I said, I got to go out. I left for a while, and it was colder than hell, and I wasn't properly attired for the cold, and I just walked around the block. I said, holy Christmas, you mean I'm going to pay the rent? Yeah. I'll be able to pay rent, man? Which is all I want. Paying the rent and doing a job that you love. That was a moment in my life. So again, I thank Bruce J. for writing such a thing and the wonderful actors. But that was a challenge doing that, not from the acting point of view. Getting through some of the human hurdles. There were obstacles there, personality obstacles.
The transition from the 60s to the 70s coincided with your transition from theater to television.
Yeah.
And in the 70s, I was born in 68. I watched a lot of TV. And I remember I loved watching with my parents All in the Family. And there was a landmark episode of All in the Family that I still remember. And then when I was doing my homework to prep for this conversation, I realized you were in this episode of All in the Family. That is not only a trailblazing, iconic episode, but it was the episode that made or break the series. Mm-hmm. What was the episode of All in the Family that you did?
For $25, what was I supposed to say? No, I figured you would. It was called The Elevator Story. And Mr. O'Connor, who was a terrific guy, he was educated in Dublin, England.
I didn't know that.
He loved the language. Smart, just a lovely gentleman. And he knew the character. He never made fun of the character, never compromised the character, which is the first lesson I learned. You want to be an actor, don't make fun of your character, protect your character. Don't play a villain like a villain because there's no such thing. That's a stereotype. Do not play stereotypes. You just make sure you take care of your character. The author will take care of the rest. So I'm thinking I lost a very dear, Norman Lear. What a guy. Piece of work. And I worked with such wonderful actors. I was, no, I can't remember who was in the elevator. Carol did not want to do this episode. He says, no, nobody's going to want to see me stuck in an elevator with a Puerto Rican and his wife, and she's giving birth, and he's helping her. And we're stuck there, and two other people. Who are the two other people? Oh, my God, wonderful actor. Roscoe Lee Brown, bless his heart, such a terrific guy. And the other lady, she's also gone. I said, nobody, and Norman had to talk him into it slowly. Meanwhile, this is all unbeknownst to me. I just arrived from New York. I said, what is this, television series? Okay, we got the script there. And we'll do the gig. And there was turmoil in the background. There was
there was.
great litigation. I mean, a big lawsuit. Carol wanted to quit the show. Norman was trying to keep on. Norman could see that this was a groundbreaking show. Carol was stuck right in the middle of, in the barrier of this particular episode. He says, "No, this is going to be a winner for you." "Yes, but I'm stuck in the elevator." No. The last shot, he says, the last shot, when that kid comes out and you hear the slap, and you look down, and when I say, look at my son. He said, that camera comes into you, that camera, and you smile, and you say, "A little boy, huh?" Bing, boom, that's it.
Amazing.
Melted. He was a human being.
Amazing.
Melted. Everybody.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
Norman knew
episode.
that.
But didn't Carol Connor, he was so against doing that episode, he threw
yeah.
the screenplay across the room.
After that, they got 4 or 5 more years, and it was,
Yeah, a bunch of Emmys.
go figure. I knew nothing about that until years later. I was told, I read, who knew? And then we spoke about it, Norman and I.
You know, when you're doing other shows throughout the time, like Maude, another
Yes.
Norman Lear show, but also, I mean, you're doing Columbo, you're doing Kojak, you're doing The Rockford Files, all these like great 70s shows that are on, all the great
A
channels.
lot of words.
What was it like auditioning at that time? Were you good at it? Obviously you were, but how did you like auditioning?
Early on, I don't audition well. Never did. I have a problem with that, and it's my problem. I admit it. I don't think I auditioned for them. I stopped auditioning, as you know, a long time ago. How long ago, Mark? 40 years? Yeah. I stopped. What? Because I find it such a contrived, artificial situation, and I don't do that well. I'm not much of a performer. I'll explain what I mean by that. I think Rex Reed once said something very interesting about that. He says, "A performer delivers a blow, and an actor receives one."
Ooh, I like that.
Hello.
Rex Reed said that?
Yes.
That's impressive. I
Yeah.
didn't know he had that in him.
In a moment, there's a flash of brilliance coming. And I said, yes, there's some truth to that. Oh, but most actors are performers in sheep's clothing, mind you. But there is a lot to that. A performer just needs a cue, Give me the cue, but I'll perform for you. Yeah, I'm dancing monkey here, man. And an actor needs, other things. The weather. Well, what do you dress? This really feels like, hey, those are good threads, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah. And so on and so forth, aroma, tactility. He needs that, and he needs ping pong. He needs to hear, so he or she can respond. So I found the audition process a bit suffocating and fake, and I stunk at it. But fortunately, usually I was doing a play. So I said, pay the ticket, see me on play. Well, we don't. It's very good. Sorry, but they pay most of the time, and then I got the job. Just interview me, then I'll sit with you and talk like a person. And that's how the good ones happened.
When you're doing these shows, though, and again, these are iconic shows. I mean, they're still remembered today. But you're working on television. You're working on top quality television for the 70s, and you're working with the likes of Norman Lear and Telly Savalas and James Garner and Bay Arthur. So, as an actor, like, what are you sort of absorbing from these other actors that you're working with? When you work on a show and you're like, okay, that was good. I'm going to take that with me to the next project.
Yes, I absorbed the way they handled themselves during the day. The process of their work was not, they didn't make a big deal about it, even though they had their own private way of getting it. So I essentially watched how they affected the mood, and that made the difference for everybody. Especially James Garner was terrific that way. Yeah. The wonderful actor who just passed away, I did my first play with, was Mr. Roberts at the Equity Library Theater. He was terrific. I said, if that's I had no experience whatsoever. I had 5 lines. I was the only non-equity person in the show. See, I had to audition for. Said my lines. Somebody on stage. I was one of the sailors. Blah 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 blah, and I got the gig. I never saw him sweat. He was such a gentleman, but he was working all the time. And he was working. He was saving the performance for the performance. It was like a fighter training. You know, you don't leave it all in training. You know, you wait for that. So he was marking time. I go here for why, and he and the director was, oh God, what's it? It'll come to me. And they would have these little conversations. They were both actors, and then they'd mark. They were just marking, and even up to the first preview, he was still working. He was still going through it, and he saved the shot for when the curtain went up. The curtain went up. I said, aha. So he was doing his work, not rushing too much, and he would make a point of including everyone. He says, we're all in this together. You know, didn't make a big deal of it. Wish I remembered his name. He had to leave the country because he couldn't get enough work here. He left for Sweden and worked in Sweden and did Shakespeare in Scandinavia because he said he was from the Bahamas, I think it was, and he said, there's no work for me here. Enough. And that was a heartbreak. But that's another story.
In 1975, you got your first, and after playing guest stars in other shows, you got your first lead in a TV series, Poppy, Abraham Rodriguez.
Right.
So what was that like?
Yeah, what are you saying to me?
Hey, I did my homework. You're doing, finally, you have a regular show that's going here. What was that like as an actor to be able to further develop a character episode after episode?
The character was easy. I had the accent. It used to work. As a matter of fact, I had such an accent that when my first agent came to visit, came to say hello after the show, he had no idea that I could speak English. So there I was in the aisle with my guitar and my beads. You know, it was the 60s. You know, and coming down, and he said, great story. Spoke too loud at that point. So to make sure that I could understand. How do you do? I'm Mr. And I said, Doc, I can understand you, man. I hear him right here. He said, we got to have a drink. So that was, I ran with it. I loved it because it gave me an opportunity to hire, to audition for my children. They said, no, we have a few kids, professional kids, and I was filled with idealism. No, I'm going to get non-professional kids. I'm going to give some Puerto Rican kids a chance, neighborhood kids. He says, that's time and money here. I had no idea about that. I said, this is a chance to do something for the community at large and for New York in general, and in particular. And I said, so they were kind enough to start the motion to have these auditions, school to school to school. Nothing showed up. They couldn't act their way out of a paper bag, man. I said, I should have gone for the professional kids. We picked two kids who were nice kids. Volt, what a headache. I tell you what, it was a headache with the kids.
But it only lasted 11 episodes, but it was the first network television series to feature an all-Latino cast.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
How proud were you to be able to have that milestone?
Love it. I loved it. I love carrying the ball that way, and I was able to affect the atmosphere, to affect the environment. That was wonderful. That's what excited me, almost more than anything. The character, that was easy. You know, I got him. I knew him like the back of my hand, and I could work nonstop. I was indefatigable, as they say, but it was a challenge because we ran up against some scripts, and we ran up against in certain parts of America where they didn't want to see a mixed couple and, you know, dark children, you know.
Imagine that. Well, at the same time that you're doing all these guest starring roles, you're also starting to make feature films. Do you remember your first time on the set of like a movie?
Yes. Okay, are you ready for this one? Okay, I was doing a play called The Great White Hope with James Earl Jones, may he rest in peace. And it was a huge hit. It was the hit of the year.
Yeah.
And it went on for 2-3 years. I did the first year because we started an arena stage. We shaped it up there for months, and then we took it to New York. I was with it forever. And then finally, after a year in New York, I said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. And near the end of the run, Ed Sheeran, the director, said, I'm going to do my first movie in Spain. I said, okay, that's it. All right. And Burt Lancaster wants to talk to you. He came to see the show last night, and he said, in his Lancaster way, he said, that's the guy, you know, something like that. I think I like him. All right. So he says, can you meet us in the afternoon before the show? I said, sure. I went there in the afternoon to meet Burt Lancaster. And there we were in the work lights, the rehearsal lights. Big guy, back like that. He had his back turned to me. And I walked in, and Ed says, come, Burt, this is Hector Elizondo. Hector, Burt, he turns, how are you? I said, yeah, you're Burt Lancaster, all right. Yeah, okay. We got along. Oh, he was from East Harlem. You know, he was born in Harlem. I said, how do you like? And he was an acrobat, an athlete at one time. And he was. This was near the end of his best time. We got to go to Spain, and the first shot, I was on a wonderful horse. I love horses. I could ride. Don't ask how, but I could ride. So I was right, and he says, "What? We're not quite ready. You have time to take a break and maybe take the horse out." I said, "That's a good idea. Take the horse out." Lovely evening, twinkling stars. I was in the south of Spain, and I thought, my God, historically, what a place. And here I am on this horse. I'm decked out like a bandit. It's great. I've got a gun. I've got this. I got a boom. I got the horse. I got the rifle and the thing. I can't believe it. I'm playing like I always played as a kid, and they're paying me for this. I can't believe it. So I slipped on the horse, Archibello. I said, let's go for a walk, Archie. And we just started walking slowly. And there were sand dunes. Walking the sand dunes, sand, and walking. I was taken by the moment, completely enthralled with my good fortune. And where I was historically just knocked me out. And then I said, okay, I think it's time to go back. I think we came this way. And then a little flop sweat started. Archibald, come on, you're the goddamn Spanish horse. Tell me where the hell we are, man. Okay, let's go. Come on. I was lost. And I said, oh, man, just with this way and that. Suddenly, from euphoria, I was in panic mode. Okay, this is not funny now. And I panicked, and I got the thing. And I said, then I saw a little glow. That's it. That's the set. And come on now, bump. I trotted over the set. I swung off the saddle just in time. He said, man, the AD says, you got here just in time. That's all right. I just took a sorry about that. Boom. I saw, and there was Burt Lancaster. How are you? Okay. He said to me, I said, how are you, Burt? He says, all right, here's the setup. He said, you got the cameras, and we're behind the camera, and you're going to push me right in front of the cameras. You got the gun. You got the goods on me. You know, you're the bad guy. I said, okay, I'm the bad guy. And then you're just going to shove me right in front, and the cameras will come right into the set as you shove me. I said, wait a minute. I've known bad guys. If you have a gun, you don't go near a person. Pew, boom, they get the gun, man. You know, you don't do that. You stand just far enough. He says, all right, go. I have the gun. I've got the. No, please, just put the gun. This is a movie. And he went, and I said, my actor studio stuff came. I said, that's not real, man. I said, all right, Spain, money. All right, okay, here we go. Ready, set, action. And I shoved him in front of the camera, and he comes, he stumbles forward in his burning here, and he goes, lets out a fart, man, and he says, welcome to Hollywood. Which I thought was funnier than hell, man. I cracked up.
You don't forget moments like that.
Oh my God! After that we became fast friends. Everybody, I became a hit with the crew because I was laughing. It was funny, man. After that we rode horseback a lot and we had a good time and I had a terrific time and I was with my darling wife for the first time out of the country. It was unforgettable.
So
I thought if this is what movie making is about, I'm in it. Little did I know that was the high point.
If you want to know what movie making is, yeah, right. If you want to know what movie making is about, obviously, the early 70s was such like that new Hollywood revolution that started in the late 60s. But, when you look at just movies like, let's say, The French Connection or Shaft or Mean Streets that depict New York as just gritty and dangerous. And one movie that always gets overlooked but is really held up as almost like a satire of New York is The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Mr. Gray.
Yeah.
What was that? Was to work with a director like Joseph Sargent, to have a co-star like Robert Shaw, like how do you
Marty Balsam.
Marty Balsam, absolutely, and of course
Walter Matthau.
Walter Matthau, but you didn't have scenes with Walter Matthau. But it's a great film. It's I think it's on Amazon Prime if you want to stream it. But how did you sort of approach Mr. Gray? What informed your approach to Mr. Gray? Because he's a bad guy.
Yeah, bad guy, and I didn't play him like a bad guy. I didn't play him like a good guy. I played him like a person who had a job to do.
Yeah.
You know, and his job was killing people. Nobody's perfect. And I said, all right. I had the hat, I had the mustache, the fake mustache. That was the gig, you know.
Yep.
We all had mustaches, and I had them, and we carried a little case, and in it was the machine guns and so on and so forth. And we were going to hijack a subway. So that was good. Thank goodness that was another job that everybody was auditioning for, and I said, I can't audition for this. I'll go meet Mr. Sargent. Little did I know what a terrific guy he was. Years later, I found out he survived the Battle of the Bulge, and he had been wounded, so he saw bad stuff. That was the bloodiest battle of the Second World War, the Battle of the Bulge. Never mentioned, never said anything. Sweet as could. But I liked the way he handled pressure very well. No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. He got his diploma now, and he said he won't. I'll meet with him anyway. I think he had seen me on stage. We sat and we talked. And I speak a little Italian. I've been around Italians all my life, and it was comfortable. He says, all right. I walked out. I said, I think I got the job, man. And I got the job. And I refused to play him like a villain. That's all. But he was obviously a man who could do bad things.
Do you remember Mr. Gray's last words?
Blow it out of your ass. Yeah, that's right.
Very impressive. That's exactly right.
I haven't remembered that. That's right. And he says, and Robert Shaw in his inimitable fashion, so, Mr. Gray, what you do? And I look out at him, I said, now I was on the top of the stairs, and I blow it out of your ass. And then he just ceremoniously, bing,
Yeah.
me. That's it.
That's it.
I didn't quite blow it out of my
That's an exit. That's your exit. Yeah.
How do you like that? Do you remember that?
That movie is so fun. It's so funny. It holds up so well. It's way better than the remake that John Travolta
Oh, yeah,
did.
it's
Yeah,
terrific.
yeah.
And it's satirical, and Walter was terrific.
Walter's great. Yeah.
Terrific. He stopped me from smoking. He
Oh, is
gave
that
me
right?
his 5-minute lecture. Yeah, I was about to light up a cigar. I love cigars. My father was a cigar maker in Puerto Rico, so cigars were part of my life. I started to light up this big one. He says, because Walter, and you know, from the Bronx, you don't hear accents like that anymore. He says, you're not going to light that thing, are you? I said, I was thinking about it. He says, you got 2 minutes? For you, yes. And he had a look of his tongue. Well, and he gave me his pitch. What happens to the cigars? I said, I don't inhale this. Forget about it. What? He says, they go up into the upper cranium and the smoke gets in there and so on and so on. He had a massive heart attack from smoking cigars. He loves cigars. I said, okay, I'm listening. I was schooled. All right. I smoked my last cigar for a while. Okay, good. All right, good. He said, then I started talking. I mentioned something about career. He says, what is it? You don't have a career. He says, a career, it's something you can lose, you know? He says, movies go bad, 2 or 3 movies, a play goes bad, especially if doing the lead, and it goes bad, it's your fault, and before, there goes your career, right? No. You want something else. You want a reputation.
What was your reputation in the 70s?
Just keep doing your work. Keep doing your work honorably. And among the actors, they said, they got a sense that I don't compromise my characters. Yeah? Whether I had an accent or anything, well, bad, good guy, bad, didn't matter to me. He was this person, yeah? And he had a point of view. And I think that's the word gets around. I've been on the other side of the casting with the sheet, you know, and there's Charlie in the front, there's Shirley and someone, pain in the ass. And suddenly, I like him, like her. I worked with her at summer stock, and she was cool, and he was going okay. Then that's how it goes, you know.
In the 70s, so you work with Burt Lancaster, you work with Robert Shaw, and then for Cuba, you work with Sean Connery. So what are some of the because actors are a sponge, what are some of the traits, some of the lessons that you learn as an actor working with people like that?
As that Carly said, he's the handsomest man in the world, Sean Connery, right? Beautiful handsome, and tall. I think it was Scots, or was he Welsh? Want to hear Sean Connery? 1 second.
Heck yeah.
I am the great Garshool in all these lands of mine, lad. That's how we spoke like that. That's how you do it, lad. And then we trade. You want to wear my toupee this morning? Or do you? We trade toupees for the hell of it. No, this doesn't look good on me. A little to the side. Ah, lad. He used to call me lad. That's how he was. What a storyteller. Man, he could regale you with, have you laughing. Cheap, but could laugh. Wouldn't pick up a check. Fine. A check never touched him. But he was terrific. We had a good time. Marty Balsam was in that too.
Marty Balsam, that's right.
Richard Lester, I think. Who
directed it? Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's right. Spain.
Yep.
We had to shoot in Spain. Why? It was called Cuba. Why couldn't we shoot in Cuba?
Yeah.
Cuba. Castro said, "Shoot here. I'm here. Food's good. Everything's good. The coffee's good. Like God knows, the music is great, man. Shoot here." And he said, "Communist or whatever." We had to shoot in Spain. So that's what. That was a wonderful gig.
I'll tell you what else was a pretty great gig. In 1980, you are working with Jerry Bruckheimer on his first movie that he ever produced. And you were also working for the first of, I think, a few times, because actually, no, it wasn't the first. You actually worked with him in the 70s, but not in a big movie like this one, American Gigolo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about working with director Paul Schrader. You're working with Richard Gere, his breakthrough role for him as well. What was that experience like? And what is a director like Paul Schrader bring out from you as an actor?
Paul never got in the way. Paul was a very quiet man, very inward. I had a feeling that there was a lot going on. And there was.
Yeah, well, yeah.
He was a very bright guy, man. He was very cool. And I said, okay, I'm going to shave completely. I want to look like a cream-faced loon for this. And I was thin. I was doing a lot of running then for some strange reason. and that was my look. And I played this sort of fundamentalist cop, right? Really. Okay, again, I didn't want to play him like your Bible-thumping fundamentalist cop, I said, no, he was just a guy who had a little bit of, a little bit of the fox in him. Said, look at me, I'm just this ordinary guy. But he had these views that were less than humane. And Richard was terrific. He came to work private. I saw what he was reading, esoteric stuff, Zen Buddhism and so on. I said, all right, let's go. It was, who knew that, I think I did 2 or 3 movies with him.
You did, there was a movie in like 76, 77, but then like American Gigolo, then obviously Pretty Woman, we'll get to that, Runaway Bride, we'll get to that. Yeah, you worked with him a lot, but like, what was your first impression of Richard Gere, and how did your acting with him, the first scenes that you filmed with him, sort of bring out something different in your performance that maybe you weren't even expecting?
He was very careful. He wasn't a hail fellow well met, but once you got his funny bone, he was all right, And he was serious about his craft, still is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Little did I know that there was something else percolating there. He was serious about being part of the solution worldwide. He had he had a sense that he wanted to improve things in his life. Our lives are very short.
Still does.
But that's something else. But it was I could sense something was going on, and of course by the time we worked later on, he was deeply involved with the Tibetan,
Yep.
yeah. So he was involved with Tibetan Buddhism.
Buddhism, yeah.
Not a bad thing to be involved with.
But did he, like, when you're prepping for your scenes, you're trying to, figure out your own approach to playing a character. I think you're making a movie with, like, let's say Richard Gere or Sean Connery or Robert Shaw. Does your interaction with these other actors sort of make you, like, reconfigure your performance or overhaul your performance, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Robert Shaw. I worked with him twice. We did a Broadway show, Strindberg, The Dance of Death, why they polished that thing off. Why with A.J. Antoon was a director at Lincoln Center, so that was and I worked with him in that. It was three-hander. It was Zoe Caldwell, Mr. Shaw, and myself. That was quite a thing. And what I learned early on with Mr. Shaw is he's during rehearsals, early on, he says, Elizondo, that's a Basque name, isn't it? I said, yes, I think it is, Robert. Yes. Do you speak Basque? I said, very few people speak Basque. I'm not Basque. That's just the name. And we spoke of that for a minute. He says, It was spot of breakfast. It was about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I said, well, I've already, join me in a spot. He said, what does that mean? So I joined him. He found a saloon early on, and he had a spot. A lot of the Brits do that, by the way, early in the morning. Bip, I said, yo, you got, I said, no, thank you, not in the morning. No, don't do that. Then I found out that he was always testing you. Very smart guy, very bright guy. But he wanted you to know that he was smart. So I said, that's not cool. He was testing you, wanted to challenge you. And this challenge you, ping pong. So I went the other way. I said, nah, I'm not very competitive. Of course I was. But that really threw him off his stride. What do you mean? Let's do this. I said, no, I'm not doing it. I'd rather sit here and contemplate. Of course, not true. And so I had him a little on edge, which is cool for the role. He played this rambunctious man who drank on stage, and I played a doctor who was very introverted, quiet. I said, I'm going to play him like that. Never had a problem after that. I refused to play the game with him.
So
he's a good guy, actually.
In the 80s, early 80s, you met a director, you met a filmmaker who directed 18 films. You were in all of them. Gary Marshall.
Yeah, I guess I was. Yes.
How did you meet this guy, and what was it about that collaboration that just made him and you just like keep coming back to each other over those years?
Oh yeah. Hey, all the producers I love to work with, they're all gone now. Well, I was invited to a basketball game, the longest running basketball game on Saturday in the business, at Gary Marshall's house. Who's Gary Marshall? It's a producer, TV. Don't you know, Mark? This show. I don't watch that. I was theater. I was going to watch that stuff, right? So, yeah, and everybody, most of the people are from New York. They're writers, there's some actors and producers and so on. I said, so, okay, you play? Yeah, I play basketball. Yeah, sure. So I went, and they said, Gary Marshall's house, and there was a court back there, and they introduced me to this fellow called Gary. And I said, he's a young man for having all those credits that they told me about. Tall guy, and he was a nice, big kind of, didn't have oomph, but he was not a bad basketball player, so big fellow. Okay, good enough. Play him. And little by little, in comes this other guy. And he had come from a softball game. So he was dressed as softball. And he had an elbow guard, he had a knee guard, and he had a character. He had a character that was from the Bronx, and he spoke like that. And I said, oh, look at that. Somebody from home. I said, all right. He had quick hands. You could tell that he played basketball one time. All right. And he was on the other team. And He said, "Oh yes, I saw you. You're there with George C. Scott and Broadway jumping around. You were good boy." Okay. I said, "All right." Then I saw you there on the steamboat. I said, "Steamboat, that one, yeah, that one." By the way, he was a smart fellow. He knew what he was doing and how he spoke. And then he said, so I'm playing against him. And he's guarding me and so on and so on. Of course, there was a chance for me to pass to my guy. And I threw it behind the back pass, like an old New York guard. The ball hit him right in the mouth. Boom. Hit in the chops. And he went down to one knee. Everybody, it looked like a E.F. Hutton commercial. He got on one knee, and he spat in his hand to make sure his teeth were there. He had all right. He says, "You're a terrific actor and a lousy passer. I think I have a movie for you."
That movie was
That's how we met.
Young Doctors in Love.
Yeah.
His first movie with you. Like, what was that experience?
Still my favorite.
Is it still your favorite? Why is it your favorite?
Well, it was so ad-libbed. It was invented every day. We'd say, "Mr. Marshall, we're ready to go." We took 4 hours setting the scene here, and all the cameras. He says, "Can't we do it over here?" He said, "What?" "This is a movie, it's not TV, you can't." So he learned, okay, all right. What he did, of course, was he treated everybody well, and he fed everybody very well.
Oh,
So everybody wanted to work for him
right.
because it was fair. And if it was your birthday, he found out they celebrated your birthday.
When the 80s were moving along and you're working with Gary and you're doing more TV, did you still have to audition?
No.
When did you stop auditioning? Like, when did you feel like you crushed that threshold where you didn't need to audition?
Sometime in the 70s.
In the 70s.
Yeah, sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, I said, because then they knew my work. You know my work. What do I have to do it again? You saw me on stage. What do I have to do this again, man?
Right.
I had a very thin skin for that because I did it badly.
Right.
I guess I must have brought in some kind of attitude. I don't.
Did you also start to feel like by this point, especially in the 80s now, that yeah, I can do this for a living. I don't have to worry.
Oh, yeah. I had a feeling. I started to have that feeling once I did my first movie. I said, I can do movies. I'm going to, hey, good. That's what I'm going to do. I do all the accents. I look like everybody. So, look there's. But working with Gary was a piece of work because he would call me at night, about 10-ish, without his teeth, right? And he'd sound something like this. "Hello? Hector, guess who this is?" I says, "I can't guess. Tell me." I went 2 for 3, Hector." He played softball. He loved me. "I went 2 for 3, and I won the..." Talked about the game. He wasn't talking about anything else, about how the game. And he'd make a joke, and he'd laugh. "By the way, you got 3 days," and then he'd give me a date. "Yeah, I think I got an idea. I'm going to send you something." "All right." I said, "Gary, there's nothing in here." "No, don't worry. There'll be. We'll do it. We'll take this character, that guy, then we'll make one guy." Yeah. And he made one rule. He says, as long as it helps the story. That's the main. If this helps move the story along, you got a deal. And that's how we did it.
So all right. So throughout the 70s and the 80s, you're working very, very steadily. I mean, look, if you go to Hector Elizondo's IMDb page, it says 162. 287. Wow. 200.
What?
I stand corrected.
No
Thank
wonder
you for
I'm
that.
tired. I deserve sitting down.
But your career is divided between 2 points here. One is before Pretty Woman and after Pretty Woman. How
That's right.
what was your first take on Barney Thompson, the concierge?
Well,
Regent Beverly
when I
Hills?
read the first script, which is called 3000, I said, this is a very dark script. Wow, she has tuberculosis. She gets kicked back out in the street at the end, and God knows. I said, this is a Disney movie.
Touchdown.
Al Pacino was going to do it with terrific actors, and I said, well, don't worry, actor. We'll make it cotton candy. I said, we'll change it. And who is this guy? The concierge, the manager there. I said, I don't know. And he went to the producers. That's who I want. He said, no, they wanted another actor. And they wanted a stock character. He says, no, I want Elizondo. He's going to bring me something, I don't know what. So I said, all right. I said, well, Gary, who is this guy? Why should I do this? It's so boring. I don't know. I said, well, I'll tell you what. He gave me the one note. He's never given me a note, a help. And he says, play the guy you'd like to work for.
Oh, that's good advice.
Okay, that's cool. I said, all right. I took a bit. Fine, come. Give me the right shoes. Give me the right thing. But then wore number 7 toupee. We had numbers for our toupees. Wear number 7. We said, okay, number 14. We'd have a joke. Okay, you want hair or without? Well, whatever. So, and that's how it went. And I had no idea that it was going to be the icon that it was.
After 20 years or so now of doing small screen, big screen roles, what were the unique challenges, like the special challenges that you face playing Barney, like that you just never had to deal with in all these other guest starring roles or lead roles in films?
I took a page from Gary's page of good advice. Wear comfortable shoes. I said, oh, wear comfortable shoes. You're going to be standing a lot. It was the easiest thing I've ever done. It was like dancing to Tito Puente, man. It was cool.
You are fantastic in this movie. You are.
Oh, by the way, there was a little wrinkle. As you know, the producers, the studio said, well, I don't know if we can afford. There were no bucks in there at all. He said, don't worry, I'll pay him. I said, it was no big money, believe me. I'll pay him. And if you like him, he says, you pay me back. So after the first few dailies, a couple of days dailies, they paid him right away. I said, okay, you got it. But then I got a sense of what the magic of this movie, when Mario, who was the production manager, and I asked him, Mario, how's it going? He says, it's terrific. He says, we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? Because everybody got along, and she was terrific, and Richard was terrific. He said, what's the problem? He says, you. I said, what? He says, they like you too much on the screen. He says, that's not the way the story is supposed to go. So we got to do some changes. Who knew? I said, all right. And they did their changes, and there were 2 scenes that they had to drop, very little moments that gave you an idea that reflected why this man had such an affinity for people on the ground. Mm-hmm. Simple little moments, and and Disney didn't. So I said, fine. It worked out pretty well.
What was it really well to the point where
I couldn't play bad guys anymore?
Okay, let's talk about that. That's what I mean, that there was a dividing line here.
All I got was that guy.
Right.
I said, wait, man, get out of here. Anybody speak Italian, they know what that means, right? I said, no, that's not. Then I still had some juice. I said, no, man. I said, I'll play no matter what nationality that I can do, but I'm not going to do that anymore. Let's change it. So I said, I want to play a bad guy. They're more interesting. They're simply more interesting. Any actor knows that. It's a challenge, and especially one that makes you laugh. Lee Marvin told me that. And we were going onto the camera, and he was tall with a great voice. And he had been a ranger in the Second World War, so he knew about war. And as we were going to camera, I said something that a young actor would say. I said, Mr. Marvin, my father and I really, really admire the way you play bad guys. And he said in that deep stentorian voice, he said, I never played bad guy in my life. Oh, I'm going to get schooled. All right. Lay it on me. I said to myself, okay, do you know bad guys? Yeah. Where are you from? I said, well, Harlem, New York. I said, have you known bad guys? Yes, I've known bad guys. Did they think they were bad guys? Not one. No. They were just, no, as a matter of fact, none. Even the guys who did very bad things didn't think they were bad guys. The guys who worked with, mobs. No, they all had a job to do, had families to raise. They were victims, so on and so on. Says, that's how you play a bad guy.
What was it like for you the morning you woke up and found that you were nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor?
that was nice. It meant that I had to do all those ceremonies, which I had. Yeah. That was nice. I've been nominated a few times for Emmys and Golden Globes. I think did I get? Yeah, Golden Globe. That was very nice.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That was an honor.
How was it different working with Julia Roberts on Pretty Woman in 1990 versus Runaway Bride in 1999?
Oh boy. Wait, there was a moment during Runaway Bride. No, well, actually that was an easy segue. What was difficult to play with her in the movie with Gary Marshall that we did Mother's Day.
Mother's Day, yeah. Mhm.
That was different because that had been, then we had been 30 years
Right.
or so, right? And we were doing this scene, and we had just started, and I got so verklempt that we had said, Gary, stop, I gotta stop, wait. And I started, and Julie knew, she looked at me. I was right back then. It was so emotional. You know, there I was, I was going to show her something, teach her. I was going to be the mentor again in a different story. And I said, I can't believe 30 years, my gosh, and we're such different people. And that was a moment.
You also, around the time of Pretty Woman, you're working with the likes of Al Pacino, and you're working with Jackie Gleason, and in The Princess Diaries, the great Julie Andrews. So just like I asked you about working with like Sean Connery and Burt Lancaster and Robert Shaw, what was it like to now work with this whole other set of like great iconic actors?
They were all terrific people. For the most part, they were a piece of cake. Never any problem. I wish I could enlighten you in some way about some process that they had. They were all prepared. That's the thing. They didn't make you wait. You know, it's just. I never had problems. Now, if somebody was going to give me a problem, I'd make sure that we address it early on, privately. You know, but I never had a problem. James Garner was just a delight to work with. As soon when you're on the set, after 2 minutes, he says, "This is nice here," you know, because as they say in Italian, the fish stinks from the head. You know, if the fish is good, the rest is all right. You know.
So after doing so many shows that didn't get picked up even for a full season, shows like Freebie and the Bean.
Funny.
Okay.
I love working with Tommy Mason.
Yeah. How about AKA Pablo with Norman Lear again?
Problem. Well, again, Norman is very persuasive, and he was at a time in his life when he was very persuasive, and we got a development deal of a few bucks. I said, yeah, that's okay, but I says this smacks. There are too many people in the room at the same time, and then nobody leaves. How are you going to handle the traffic? And if everybody's going to have this, they're all Mexican Americans. It has to have a similarity in sound. You know, sound for me is very important. You know. And everybody had a different accent, and then you had Paul had never acted; he was a stand-up comic, and the mother was anyway. They forced me to volunteer to direct 3 of them.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, at some point, Norman said, "We need to get a new director." I said, "Yeah, I guess so." She's leaving. She was terrific. It wasn't the director's fault; it was the writing, and. I said, yes, I guess we have to. You're right. I'm looking at him. I said, what? He says, yeah. The cast says you should direct. Why? I've never uttered a word about directing. He says, no. Talks to you, he gives you a little nod. I said, but that's just coaching. That's just helping. Actors helping actors. Well, that's not directing. I don't know about snapping the show. In those days, you had to go into a different booth and you had to snap the show, right? And so it required you not being on this. You couldn't be an actor. You had to be up there. You're 100 feet away. I say, don't worry, we'll get somebody with. So no matter what I said, he said, don't worry, we'll do it. Besides, I'm not in the DGA. He says, yes, you are. Okay. All right. Okay. Besides, we'll help you. I said, the cast is all with you. Well, when I could have done it, I said, honey, I'm going to direct this thing. I hated it.
You hated
First
directing.
time I got broke out in a rash. I said, "Oh, the problems of directing." And I remember what James Gardner told me when I was on the set with him, and I had naive questions because I had hardly done any TV. He said, "You own the equipment. The studio rents all the equipment from you, Jim. You seem to know everything and everybody. You know how to run the show. Why don't you direct?" This is coming from a person who, in the theater, director is very important. Right? And he said, "See that guy over there?" I said, "Yeah." There was a guy, a cigarette in each hand. He's walking back and forth. "That's the director." "I don't want to look like that, do you?" I said, "No." He says, "You're just a traffic cop on television, man." He says, I don't have to do that." So that I got the idea. I said, "No, enough for me, man."
But what was for you, because after doing all these shows that maybe didn't even make it through a full season, 1994, you hit the jackpot finally with a show called Chicago Hope.
Oh.
A show in which you were in every episode, lasted 6 seasons, 141 episodes. You and Alan Arkin were the only cast members to stay from start to finish. What was it like meeting David E. Kelley, the creator, writer, producer, a showrunner, for the first time? And what struck him about him that was different from every other director, producer, writer that you had worked with?
David's a craftsman. The jokes are right. In other words, the writing is good.
Yeah.
We used to call it the jokes, and so it wouldn't sound precious. Did you know your jokes? You memorize your jokes? I got my jokes. Yeah. The writing was wonderful. It was difficult because it was real medicine. It was not about somebody stooping in the closet. This is about real stuff, and you had to talk the talk, and it's got to sound like it's something that you do every day, and it wasn't. That was difficult.
Let's talk about that for the kind of prep that you had to do to make that medical jargon sound like you really knew what you were doing.
We had doctors on the set. Every episode there was a different doctor, a different specialty for whatever was the special procedure that was highlighted that episode. And by the way, the doctors who came to work there, these were fancy doctors. They had more degrees than a thermometer. And they all they wanted to do was be extras. "Can I just go by the phone? Can I just make them making a call? Can I do that cross? Can I make that cross?" I said, "But doctor, you're a doctor. You're a fancy doctor. What do you? Just let me." Okay. They would stay on the set the whole day. This is a different world. I've never been there. I don't live like this. I don't have this kind of, what they were saying, this kind of cooperation. Because when a set is going well, it's like a symphony orchestra. It works. It's great cooperation. That's a beautiful thing to be involved with. And they just love the kibitzing, the serious, the technique. Always made me laugh.
I meant to ask you, and this is actually the perfect time to ask, because on a show like this, where that medical jargon has to sound just so natural, after I guess about 30 years now of acting in front of the camera, how do you remember your lines?
Not too well anymore. It's like I used to be a steel trap, and now I'm a sieve. It's depending on the nature of it. If it's well written, if it's Shakespeare, you remember. Yeah. I remember one line from a Scottish play, 16th century Scottish play that I did in repertory theater, and I remember that particular line because the way it's written. You want to hear 16th century Scottish dialect?
Go for it.
Brrr, got to get the rrr. Luckily I speak Spanish, those brrr. We are giving you but poor hunting Wamfrey. The Dundee Rexdale had word you were coming, I think. They're a while beyond to the Tiviotdale to bide on the lane there until we showed them our backs. That's 16th century. And so we had a glossary. People were looking up, what the hell did he say? And that's how you had to speak, you see. But then I was a baby. I was 30 years old, Yeah. So
did you have a process? Did you just read the script over and over again? Did you have?
Yes. First, I have to know what the scene is about. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do I want? What is this about? I go from here to there. Okay, now I know what it's about, and then I see where is it bumpy here? No, that's literate there. That's people don't speak like that. If it's contemporary piece, no, it's got to be more colloquial. That's important. Some people speak this way, some people speak that way. That you have to fix that. You have to fix things in your own script, and essentially you have to be your own director. And that's a good lesson.
You know, I asked you what it was like when you were nominated for a Golden Globe, but what was it like the night of the Emmys when you heard your name announced as the winner for supporting actor? Yes, that deserves applause.
That was me, Jim. Thank you. Thanks. I was separated from my wife by somebody, and it was all a dizzy thing, and I reached out to her, and I didn't quite kiss her. It was a whirlwind of a moment, and suddenly I was on stage. All I could think of was thank my mother and father in 107th Street, which was the neighborhood that raised me, and that's all I could think. And George Carlin was out there. I looked at him and he said, he's from my neighborhood. He says, you know what I'm talking about, George? And he nodded. Oh, yeah, All I could think of was 107th Street and the Depression. And I was lucky that I had that man that was my father during that time. So I was very grateful for the people who shaped me.
After 6 seasons, though, I mean, you finally are playing a recurring role. Like you don't have the recurring role, lead role, and at the end of each season, you hear you get picked up. But what was it like at the end of 6 seasons after being in character, so to speak, for 6 seasons as Dr. Phil Balders? What was it like to shed the character, to get out of character after playing it for so long?
I mean, you're speaking of Chicago Hope?
Yep.
It took a beat. It took getting out of the clothes. But by then, I was over here with it because it took too long to get to work. And traffic is a bane of my existence, I used to get from 20th Century in 20 minutes, and by the time a year and a half later, it was an hour and a half.
Yeah.
An hour and 40. And I said, get out of here with that. Where's the subway, for God's sake? Get out of here. Traffic is disgusting. It's horrible. I hate traffic.
Do you think we all agree on that? Yeah. But to go from a drama series, a drama of Chicago Hope for 6 seasons to a comedy for 9 seasons on 2 different networks that lasted for 194 episodes, Last Man Standing with Tim Allen. Different kind of show completely. It's a comedy. I think you filmed it in front of a studio audience.
Yes. That was good.
So what was that? Was that the first time you filmed a regular kind of series in front of a studio audience?
No, we did that with Margaret Colin. What was the name of that? Foley Square, where I played the lawyer. That was my 4th Jewish character or something. I did a lot on stage, and so I said, I don't want to get typecast. It was wonderful working in front of the audience, and it gets to be a family. You know exactly how to pace yourself. Do you know what I mean? You're waiting for the changes. The challenge is you don't want to memorize too soon because it's going to be changed. You don't want to lock yourself in.
Right.
So you've got to keep that script with you all the time. And the people who are not accustomed to doing TV series want to memorize things. Don't memorize, man. You'll get it. They'll rewrite this. The next day, it's a whole different scene. So you have to get used to that. And but I love, of course, being in the audience. You get that feedback. That's the difference between having an audience and just having a cold camera.
What was it like working with Tim Allen on a show like that?
Oh, yeah, he was a professional. He came ready most of the time, Tim. He was very funny, man. But like all people who are funny, there's a still waters run deep. That's the thing about comedians. There's another level there that makes it interesting. But he really cared about the quality of what he's doing, cared about the quality of the show, and he cared about about the family that he was creating. He loved that atmosphere, that ambiance. So I particularly liked that it was close to the house.
It's all about the drive.
First time I had a gig that wait a minute, I can get there in 10 minutes. Surface Streets. Hey, I was at Radford. I was in Sherman Oaks. It's terrific. I said, hey, that's terrific.
When doing Last Man Standing, or even more importantly in this case for this next question, Chicago Hope, is there a point when you are doing a show when you're doing a series, whether it lasts for 11 episodes or 6 seasons or 9, where you crush a threshold, where you start to feel a sense of ownership in your character, where you're reading a script, you go back to the writers, the producers, and say, I don't know if my character would do that. How about this instead?
Yeah, early on in the show, some clever young writer said, and my character would do this and this and this. And I said, Tim, let's have a meeting. I called him in, Tim Allen, I said, Tim. And I said, I can't do this show. Whoa. And I told the director that. But he was cool. I said, and I explained why. And then he realized, you can't. You're compromising the character. You're throwing a curveball. It doesn't make any sense. He wouldn't be doing that. You'd ruin the show, and you'd ruin. When I spoke concretely, it would ruin the business. We have a business. We would have lawsuits within the story.
Right.
Because suddenly I turned into this lecher who was doing things in the office with the young. That's not cool. Unless I bought that character from the get-go. That's something else. A character I probably wouldn't buy anyway. But suddenly you throw this because you think it's cute? No. Get yourself another Puerto Rican. How are you doing this?
Well, like I said, we take questions from the audience here. This next one's really good. It's from Eloy. Eloy. When you first started your career, did you find that your agents hid or pushed your Latino heritage?
That's interesting. They were confused. That was confused because, I come from a multiracial family, the Caribbean. There's African, and there's a Taino, there's indigenous, and of course there's European, and God knows what else. So, and I came out looking the way I look. But if you look at the family portrait from the farm in Cedar, it's just like the color of the rainbow. But that's just the way it is. So they were confused by that. Yes, they wanted me. First of all, they wanted me to change my name. And I said, They wanted me to cap my teeth and wear a toupee. I said, okay, then you want yourself another boy. You ain't going to get this guy, And that was then when you didn't have any options. Yes, and they wanted me to play kooky drug dealers. I said, I don't know folks in my family or anybody in my circle, my outer circle that's like that. So no, there are other people who can do that, and they need the job. But no, unless it's a real story about a drug dealer. You're not using him as a stereotype, background, prop,
right.
Which is what it is. I'm not a prop. You're going to do a story about a drug dealer. That's a different deal.
Right.
I'll do that in a minute. If it's well written, you got me. But yes, they tried for a second. Luckily for me, the eyes are blue, skin looks white. I'm sorry, but that's the name of the game. If I looked like my granddaddy, I wouldn't have gotten past first base.
Wow. Excellent.
That's to be candid.
Yeah, I have to be candid, yes. But you have always worked, like over these, since all the things we covered throughout this conversation here, like you've always worked. Why do you think, there are certain actors, they kind of go through dry spells or whatever, or they their time is done, but you have stayed consistently working since the 60s, really?
Well, first is reputation, thank goodness. And second, I do comedy and drama.
Which do you like doing more?
Oh, comedy. Comedy's harder.
Why is it hard for you?
Well, because you have to the beats, and you have the specificity of comedy is particular. There's a lot of discipline in comedy. The timing is, but you got to know that timing. You got to know where the rests are. Yeah, that's something that's difficult to do. In drama, essentially, I'm going to simplify it. You could have a terrible cold, and you could say the cavalry went that way. It doesn't have to be funny, right? But it's difficult to go the cavalry. That's funny. See what I mean? So it's a challenge doing comedy.
Which do you prefer, TV or film?
Well, I prefer whatever's close to the house. Now, as long as we can have dinner together.
Love it.
Now, by the way, that I don't hold a candle to what she was as an actor. Yeah, and she knows it. Yeah. One of the few people who quit the business after she won an Emmy.
Oh.
For reasons of her own.
What about, okay, there, because you have, I mean, if we were going to cover each and every TV show and each and every film, we'd be here for 8 hours, which is totally fine by me. But is there a series, is there a film, is there a role that you are really, really proud of, that you love, that maybe kind of got overlooked, that you'd like people to check out?
Yeah, Tortilla Soup.
Tortilla 2001.
Tortilla
That came out, 2001.
They did it for under $2 million, and it was hard. It was a quickie, no money at all, but that's cool. And we worked hard. It was almost a terrific movie.
It is a terrific movie because it's a comedy, but it's also a drama.
Oh yeah.
And it's a great dynamic with you and the actress playing your daughters.
Yeah.
It's streaming on Peacock. So Tortilla Soup, it came out in 2001.
Yeah, it's a tearjerker.
Why do you like that role? Why do you like that
It's
film?
about love, family, and food.
And it holds up. It holds up really,
It holds
really
up pretty well, yes.
Oh, yeah. It
I
really,
didn't like
really
that.
does.
Yeah, it was a difficult gig, man. It was a very hard gig. The director, the original director, disappeared just before we rolled.
What was the best advice that someone gave to you, and who gave it to you?
In terms of working,
Yes.
well, I have to go back to Gary Marshall. Oh yeah. I was about to go on stage doing something out of town. I think it was Stockbridge, perhaps, but and I was supposed to enter stage. I know what it was. It was, oh my goodness, Rose Tattoo, and I was playing Italian. Of course, the truck driver, Mangiacavallo. So I think his name was Alfredo Mangiacavallo, which means to eat a horse. So I was supposed to enter crying. In tears, so you have to prepare yourself emotionally to come on stage, boom, in tears. And I just couldn't whomp them up, man. And I was during the rehearsal, I said, I can't get this thing. And this old guy said, what are you trying to do? He says, come on, don't bother me. I'm preparing. What are you doing? He said, come on, man, I'm supposed to enter crying. Don't bother. He says, pause. And I'm thinking, you know how to, it's easy. You know how to do it? I said, would you please? He says, please. Just pull the hairs from inside your nose just before you go in. I said, get out of here, please. I told him, that's cheating. He said, no. Okay, I'll try it. You know, it worked. And I couldn't stop crying. That's a good piece of advice. Gary Marshall said, wear comfortable shoes, all right? Make sure you're prepared. Don't make fun of your character, ever.
Now, would you apply that advice? Because, the business has just gone through a whole lot of change. Just over
I couldn't
the
do it
last,
today.
Like 5 years, really. And it's been really, really hard for working actors.
I couldn't do it.
What advice do you have for actors who are still trying to just find their time?
Have an auxiliary gig. You have to make sure you have a thick skin. I don't know how they can audition today. It's all on camera. You don't get to meet anybody. You met human beings then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a different day. You went to the studio and met the fancy person, this lady, so you had to talk. Even when you went to an audition, you auditioned with a human being. Now it's your camera at home with it. Hey, who do I talk to, man? You have to think of yourself as a storyteller, and that's important. You're an intermediary, you're an author and audience. That's your job. You tell the story, and you're part. And you have to, you remind yourself of your atomic insignificance. That's important. It's not about you, ever. In life.
Well, I bring this conversation to a close by saying to you the last thing that Barney Thompson said to Vivian in Pretty Woman. It has been a pleasure knowing you. Come visit us again sometime. Hector Elizondo, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much.